The transport ship landed on the Volanthi homeworld, just as the twin suns began to set. Lieutenant Daniel Cole stepped off the ramp and felt the warm air hit his face. The sky was purple and orange, and the city in front of him shined like it was made of glass. He had seen pictures before, but nothing could prepare him for the real thing. Daniel was 32 years old, a Marine from a small town in Colorado. He had joined the military at 18 and worked his way up through hard work and dedication. Now he was part of Earth's diplomatic security corps, assigned to protect important people on alien worlds. This was his biggest assignment yet. The Volanthi were one of humanity's oldest allies. First contact had happened 30 years ago, and since then, the two species had built a strong friendship. The Volanthi were tall and elegant, with silver blue skin and eyes that looked like liquid gold. They lived for hundreds of years and valued peace above all else. But they had learned something interesting about humans in those 30 years. Humans would die to protect others. It was something most alien species found hard to understand. A Volanthi officer walked toward Daniel. He was tall, over 7 feet, and wore armor that looked like flowing water. His name was Captain Vorath, and he would be Daniel's contact during his stay. "Lieutenant Cole," Vorath said in perfect English. "Welcome to Volanthus Prime. We are honored to have human assistance for the Unity Festival." Daniel shook his hand. The Volanthi's skin was cool to the touch. "Thank you, Captain. I'm looking forward to working with your people." "Your partner arrived yesterday," Vorath continued. "She is already at the palace, reviewing security arrangements." Daniel smiled. Megan Price was always one step ahead. They had worked together for 5 years, and he trusted her more than anyone else in the galaxy. She was from Kansas, with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. Nothing got past her. The journey to the Crystal Palace took about an hour. Daniel sat in a floating transport and watched the city pass by below. Everything was beautiful. The buildings curved and twisted like living things. Gardens floated in the air. Rivers of light flowed through the streets. It was hard to believe that such a peaceful place could be in any danger. But danger was exactly why Daniel was here. The Unity Festival was a big event. Representatives from 12 star systems would gather to renew their peace agreements. It happened every 10 years, and this year it was being held on Volanthus Prime. Queen Serafina Veleshter herself would host the ceremony. She had ruled for over 200 years and was loved by her people. Daniel knew that any event this big was a target. Too many important people in one place. Too many opportunities for someone who wanted to cause chaos. The palace was even more impressive than the city. It rose from the ground like a mountain of crystal, catching the light of the suns and throwing rainbows across the landscape. Guards stood at every entrance, their armor gleaming. Daniel found Megan in a small room filled with screens and maps. She looked up when he entered and grinned. "About time you got here," she said. "I've been going crazy looking at all this by myself." "What have you found?" Daniel asked, pulling up a chair. Megan's smile faded. "I'm not sure yet, but something feels off." She showed him what she had been working on. Security schedules, staff rotations, supply deliveries. Everything looked normal on the surface, but Megan had noticed small things that didn't add up. Servants who spent too much time in certain areas. Shipments that arrived at strange hours. Guards who had requested transfers at the last minute. "It could be nothing," Megan admitted. "But my gut tells me otherwise." Daniel trusted her gut. It had saved their lives more than once. "Have you talked to anyone about this?" "I tried to bring it up with Captain Vorath. He said I was being paranoid. Apparently, humans see threats everywhere." Daniel frowned. The Volanthi were good people, but they had lived in peace for so long that they had forgotten what real danger looked like. They couldn't imagine that anyone would want to hurt their queen. Over the next few days, Daniel and Megan worked hard. They walked every corridor of the palace. They checked every entrance and exit. They studied the faces of every servant and guard. The Unity Festival was only 3 days away, and they needed to be ready. Daniel also caught his first glimpse of Queen Seraphina. She was attending a meeting with her advisors, and Daniel was stationed outside the door. When she walked past him, she paused for just a moment. Her amber eyes met his, and she gave him a small nod. "You are one of the humans," she said. Her voice was soft but carried power. "I thank you for coming to help protect my people." "It's an honor, Your Majesty," Daniel replied. She studied him for a moment longer, as if she was trying to understand something. Then she continued on her way, her silver-blue robes flowing behind her like water. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what Megan had found. The small details that didn't fit. The feeling that something bad was coming. He got out of bed and walked through the palace. The halls were quiet and dark, lit only by the soft glow of bioluminescent plants. His footsteps echoed on the crystal floor. As he walked, he noticed something strange. A servant was moving through a restricted area, carrying a small box. The man moved quickly and quietly, looking around as if he was afraid of being seen. Daniel followed him from a distance. The servant went down a staircase that led to the lower levels of the palace. Daniel had studied the maps, and he knew that area was supposed to be empty. It was used for storage, nothing more. The servant disappeared through a door. Daniel waited a moment, then followed. The room beyond was dark. Daniel's eyes adjusted slowly, and he saw that it was full of crates and old furniture. But in the corner, several figures were gathered around the table. They were speaking in low voices, and the language was Volanthi. Daniel didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. These people were planning something bad. He pulled back before they could see him and made his way back to his room as quietly as he could. His heart was pounding. He needed to tell Megan. He needed to tell Captain Varth, but would anyone believe him? The next morning, Daniel shared what he had seen with Megan. Her face went pale. "We need to report this," she said. "Varth won't listen. He thinks we're paranoid, remember? Then we go over his head. We talked to the Queen's personal guard. We talked to someone who will listen." The time was running out. The Unity Festival was only 2 days away. Whatever was being planned would happen soon. Daniel could feel it in his bones. He made a decision. If no one else would take this seriously, then he would handle it himself. He would stay close to the Queen during the opening ceremony. He would watch everyone who came near her. And if anyone tried to hurt her, he would stop them. No matter what it cost him. Daniel looked out the window at the beautiful crystal city. Somewhere out there, enemies were hiding in the shadows. The day of the Unity Festival arrived with clear skies and warm sunshine. The Crystal Palace was filled with activity from early morning. Servants rushed through the halls carrying flowers and decorations. Guards stood at every corner, their armor polished until it shined. The air itself seemed to hum with excitement. Daniel had barely slept the night before. He had spent hours going over security plans with Megan, trying to figure out where an attack might come from. They had reported their concerns again, but Captain Vorath had only grown more frustrated with them. "You humans see danger in every shadow," Vorath had said, his voice tired. "The palace is the safest place in the galaxy. Nothing will happen." Daniel hoped the captain was right, but he didn't believe it. The Grand Hall was the largest room Daniel had ever seen. The ceiling rose so high that it seemed to touch the clouds. Chandeliers made of living light floated in the air, casting soft colors across everything below. The floor was made of white crystal that had been walked on for thousands of years. And gathered in this room were some of the most powerful beings in the known galaxy. Ambassadors from 12 star systems stood in small groups, talking and laughing. Some were humanoid, others were not. Daniel saw beings with 4 arms and beings with no arms at all. He saw creatures covered in scales and creatures covered in feathers. The diversity of life in the universe never stopped amazing him, but his attention kept returning to one person. Queen Seraphina stood at the center of the hall, greeting each guest personally. She wore ceremonial robes that seemed to be made of starlight itself. They flowed around her like water, changing color with every movement. Her silver blue skin glowed softly, and her amber eyes were warm and welcoming. She was the heart of this gathering. Everyone wanted to speak with her. Everyone wanted to be near her. And somewhere in this crowd, someone wanted to kill her. Daniel positioned himself near a pillar, about 30 feet from the queen. He was close enough to see her clearly, but far enough to avoid drawing attention. Megan was stationed near the eastern entrance, watching everyone who came and went. They communicated through small hand signals, a system they had developed over years of working together. The hours passed slowly. Speeches were given. Toasts were made. Music played softly in the background. Everything seemed perfect, but Daniel's instincts were screaming at him. Something was wrong. He could feel it like a cold wind on the back of his neck. He scanned the crowd again and again. Most of the faces were unfamiliar to him, but he had memorized the staff and guards. He knew who was supposed to be here and who was not. Then he saw something that made his blood run cold. A servant was moving through the crowd, carrying a tray of crystal goblets. There was nothing unusual about that, but Daniel recognized the man's face. It was one of the people he had seen in the secret meeting the night before. The servant was getting closer to the queen. Daniel started moving before he even realized what he was doing. He pushed past guests, ignoring their surprised looks. His eyes never left the servant. The man was only 10 feet from the queen now. 5 feet. He was reaching toward his tray, but something about the motion was wrong. His hand wasn't going for a goblet. It was going underneath the tray. Daniel didn't have time to shout a warning. He didn't have time to pull his weapon. He only had time to run. The servant dropped his tray. The crash of breaking glass filled the air. In the confusion that followed, 3 figures emerged from the crowd. They moved faster than any normal Volante should move. Their eyes were wild and their hands held glowing blades. They were heading straight for the queen. Daniel threw himself forward. He crashed into the first assassin just as the blade came down. The weapon meant for Seraphine's heart found Daniel's shoulder instead. He felt the blade burn through his vest and sink deep into his flesh. The pain was incredible, like fire spreading through his entire body. But he didn't stop. He grabbed the assassin's arm and twisted, using his training to throw the man off balance. His other hand found his sidearm. He drew and fired in one smooth motion. The assassin fell. The second assassin was moving toward him now. Daniel tried to raise his weapon, but his injured arm wouldn't respond. The blade cut across his chest, opening a wound that immediately began to bleed. Then Megan was there. She had crossed the entire hall in seconds, her own weapon firing. The second assassin dropped. The third assassin was almost at the queen. Daniel forced himself to move. His body screamed in protest, but he pushed through the pain. He grabbed the assassin from behind and pulled him away from Seraphina. The blade slashed at Daniel's side, but he held on. The royal guard finally arrived. They overwhelmed the third assassin and pulled him to the ground. The fight was over in seconds, but it felt like hours. Daniel's legs gave out. He collapsed onto the crystal floor, his blood spreading across the white surface like red paint. The beautiful hall spun around him. Voices shouted in the distance, but they seemed very far away. A face appeared above him. Amber eyes looked down at him with an expression he couldn't read. Queen Seraphina was kneeling beside him, her starlight robes now stained with his blood. "You saved me," she said. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. Daniel tried to speak, but no words came out. The pain was overwhelming. He could feel the poison from the blades spreading through his body, burning everything it touched. "Stay with me," the queen said. "You will not die. I will not allow it." Guards and healers rushed around them. Megan appeared at his other side, her face pale with fear. "You stupid, brave fool," she said, her voice breaking. "What were you thinking?" Daniel wanted to tell her that he wasn't thinking at all. He was just doing what felt right, protecting someone who needed protection. That was what humans did, but the darkness was closing in. The last thing he saw before it took him was Seraphine's face. Her amber eyes filled with tears. The grand hall of the Crystal Palace had seen many things over the thousands of years of its existence. It had seen celebrations and mourning. It had seen peace treaties and declarations of war. But it had never seen anything like what happened that day. A human, one of those short-lived and fragile beings from a small planet called Earth, had thrown himself in front of 3 assassins to save a queen he barely knew. He had taken wounds that should have killed him instantly, and he had kept fighting until the threat was over. The Unity Festival was paused. The guests were evacuated. The assassins were taken away for questioning, and Daniel Cole was rushed to the Royal Medical Center, where the finest healers in the Volanti Empire worked to save his life. But the poison was strong. It was designed to kill slowly, to cause maximum suffering. Even the advanced Volanti technology struggled against it. Queen Seraphina stood outside the medical chamber, watching through a crystal window as the healers worked. Her advisors urged her rest, to change out of her blood-stained robes, to let others handle this matter. She refused to move. The human had nearly died for her, a being whose entire lifetime was just a brief moment compared to her own. He had given everything to protect her, without hesitation, without asking for anything in return. She had lived for over 200 years. She had seen much and learned much, but she had never understood humans. Not truly. They were fascinating and confusing. They burned so brightly and faded so quickly. But now, watching this one human fight for his life, she began to understand. Their short lives didn't make them less. It made them more. Every moment mattered to them. Every action counted. They couldn't afford to hesitate or hold back. The night grew darker. The healers continued their work, and Queen Seraphina stayed by the window. Daniel drifted in a sea of darkness. Sometimes he would rise close to the surface and hear voices around him. Other times he would sink deep, where there was nothing but silence and pain. The poison was like fire in his veins, burning through every part of his body. He saw strange things in that darkness. Memories from his childhood in Colorado. His mother Grace standing on the porch of their small house, waving goodbye as he left for basic training. His first day in space, looking down at Earth through a viewport and feeling so small and so amazed at the same time. The faces of friends he had lost over the years. And then, cutting through all of it, a voice. Soft but strong. Speaking words in a language he didn't understand, but somehow the meaning reached him anyway. Stay. Fight. Do not leave. Daniel held on to that voice like a lifeline. He used it to pull himself back toward the light. When he finally opened his eyes, everything was blurry. He blinked several times, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. He was in a room made of crystal, with soft light coming through the walls. Machines hummed quietly around him, doing things he couldn't understand. And sitting beside his bed, still wearing her blood-stained robes, was Queen Seraphina. Daniel thought he must be dreaming. The ruler of an entire planet would not sit by the bed of a simple human soldier. It didn't make sense, but she was there. Her silver blue hand held his, and her amber eyes watched him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "You're awake," she said. Her voice was tired, but filled with relief. "The healers weren't sure you would survive the night." Daniel tried to speak, but his throat was dry. Serafina picked up a small cup and helped him drink. The liquid was cool and sweet, and it eased the burning in his chest. "Thank you," he managed to say. His voice was rough and weak. "Thank me?" Serafina shook her head slowly. "You nearly died protecting me." "I should be thanking you. Just doing my job," Daniel said. "No." A grip on his hand tightened. "What you did was far beyond any job. You threw yourself in front of blades that were meant for me. You took wounds that should have killed you, and you kept fighting until the threat was gone." She paused, her eyes searching his face. Why? Daniel thought about the question. It was a fair one. Why had he done it? He wasn't some great hero. He was just a Marine from Colorado who happened to be in the right place at the wrong time. "I don't know," he admitted. "I saw them coming for you, and I just moved. I didn't think about it. It felt like the right thing to do." Serafina was quiet for a long moment. Outside the crystal walls, Daniel could see that it was night. Stars filled the purple sky, more stars than he had ever seen from Earth. "The healers say the poison is finally leaving your body," Serafina said. "Your wounds are healing well. You will recover fully." "How long have I been unconscious?" 3 days. Daniel's eyes widened. 3 days. The Unity Festival must be in chaos. The assassination attempt would be all over the news. Earth would be worried about him. "Megan," he said suddenly. "My partner. Is she okay?" "She is fine. She has been asking about you constantly." A small smile crossed Seraphine's face. "She threatened to shoot Captain Varath if he didn't let her see you." Despite everything, Daniel laughed. It hurt his chest, but he couldn't help it. That sounded exactly like Megan. "She is a good friend," Serafina continued. "She explained to me how long the two of you have worked together. How many times you have saved each other's lives." "We're partners," Daniel said simply. "That's what partners do. And is that what all humans do? Protect each other so fiercely?" Daniel thought about it. "I guess so. We don't live very long compared to most species. So we hold tight to the people we care about. We protect them with everything we have." Serafina nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something she had been thinking about. She still hadn't let go of his hand. "You should rest," she said. "You need to regain your strength." "What about you?" Daniel asked. "You look exhausted. Have you slept at all?" "I have been here," she admitted. "Since the healers brought you in? For 3 days?" "Yes." Daniel didn't know what to say. A queen, one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, had sat by his bedside for 3 days. She had held his hand while he fought for his life. She had spoken to him in the darkness, telling him to stay, to fight, to not leave. "Why?" he asked, turning her own question back on her. Serafina looked away, her amber eyes focusing on something outside the crystal walls. "I have ruled my people for over 200 years. In that time, many have served me. Many have sworn to protect me. But you are the first who actually did. Not because you had to, not because it was your duty, but because you chose to." She turned back to him. And Daniel saw something in her eyes that he hadn't expected. Vulnerability. Even queens could feel uncertain sometimes. "When you fell at my feet, covered in blood, I felt something I have not felt in a very long time," she continued. "Fear. Not for myself, but for you. I was afraid that you would die, and I would never be able to thank you properly. You don't owe me anything. Daniel said. Perhaps not, but I stayed anyway. She finally released his hand and stood up. The healers will be here soon to check on you. I should go and let you rest. She walked toward the door, her blood-stained robes trailing behind her. At the threshold, she paused and looked back. When you are recovered, I would like to speak with you more. There is much I want to understand about your people. About you specifically. Before Daniel could respond, she was gone. Over the next few hours, Daniel drifted in and out of sleep. Healers came and went, checking his wounds and adjusting the machines. The pain was fading, replaced by a deep tiredness that made it hard to keep his eyes open. Megan visited in the morning. She burst into the room like a storm, her eyes red from lack of sleep. You absolute fool, she said, sitting down hard in the chair Serafina had occupied. Do you have any idea how scared I was? I thought you were going to die right there on the floor. Sorry, Daniel said weakly. Sorry? You're sorry. Megan's voice cracked. You jumped in front of 3 assassins with poison blades. You got stabbed 3 times. And you're sorry? Would you rather I let them kill the queen? Megan opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. She let out a long breath and shook her head. No, she admitted. I would have done the same thing. That's the frustrating part. They sat in silence for a while. Megan told him what had happened after he lost consciousness. The assassins had been part of a radical group that opposed the peace accords. They had used forbidden technology to enhance their bodies, making themselves faster and stronger, but also unstable. 2 of them had died from the enhancements before they could be questioned. The 3rd was still being interrogated. The whole galaxy is talking about what you did, Megan said. A human saving the Volanti Queen. It's big news. Great, Daniel muttered. Just what I wanted. Attention. Megan smiled, and some of the tension left her face. Get some rest, partner. I'll be back later. As she left, Daniel thought about everything that had happened. 3 days ago, he had been just another security consultant doing his job. Now he was apparently famous, and a queen had sat by his bed for 3 days waiting for him to wake up. Life was strange sometimes. The days of recovery passed slowly. Daniel's wounds healed faster than the Volanti healers had expected. They said it was because of human biology. Humans might live shorter lives, but their bodies fought hard to survive. Every cell worked overtime to repair the damage. Daniel spent most of his time in the healing chamber, reading reports and watching the news. The assassination attempt had shaken the entire galaxy. Representatives from the 12 star systems had released statements, condemning the attack and praising the human who had stopped it. Earth's government had called him a hero. His mother had sent him a message through the Ansible network, crying and telling him how proud she was. He didn't feel like a hero. He just felt tired, but the thing that confused him most was the queen. Serafina visited him every day, sometimes for just a few minutes, sometimes for hours. She would ask him questions about Earth, about his life, about humanity in general. And she would tell him things in return. Stories about her long reign, memories from centuries past, the weight of ruling an entire civilization. On the 5th day after he woke up, Daniel was finally allowed to leave his bed. A healer helped him walk to a balcony overlooking the palace gardens. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. It was the most beautiful thing Daniel had ever seen. Serafina found him there an hour later. She had changed out of her ceremonial robes into something simpler. Without all the starlight and formality, she looked almost normal. Almost like someone he might have met back on Earth. The healers say you will be fully recovered within a few more days, she said, standing beside him at the railing. That's good news. Yes. She paused. Though I find myself conflicted about it. Daniel looked at her with surprise. Why? Serafina didn't answer right away. She watched the sun sink below the horizon, her amber eyes reflecting the fading light. When you are recovered, you will return to Earth, she said finally. That is the natural order of things. Your people will want to celebrate you. Your government will give you medals and honors. You will move on to your next assignment. Probably, Daniel admitted. He hadn't thought much about what came next. And I will remain here, ruling my people as I have for over 200 years, as I will continue to do for perhaps 200 more. Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. Something sad. That's a long time, Daniel said softly. Yes, it is. She turned to face him. Do you know what the hardest part of immortality is, Daniel Cole? It was the first time she had used his first name. It felt strangely intimate. I can't imagine, he said. Everyone leaves. Everyone dies. Her amber eyes held his. I have watched generations of my people grow old and pass away. I have seen friends become memories. Lovers become names on monuments. After a while, you learn not to get too close to anyone. It hurts too much when they're gone. Daniel understood what she was saying. He understood why she was saying it. The connection between them, whatever it was, would be brief by her standards. A few weeks, maybe months. Then he would go back to his life, and she would continue with hers. And eventually, in what would feel like the blink of an eye to her, he would grow old and die. I'm sorry, he said. It seemed inadequate, but he didn't know what else to say. Don't be. Serafina shook her head. That is not why I'm telling you this. I'm telling you because despite knowing all of that, despite knowing how much it will hurt when you leave, I find myself not caring. She reached out and took his hand. Her skin was cool against his. You asked me why I stayed by your side for 3 days while you fought for your life, she continued. I have been thinking about that question, and I believe I finally have an answer. Daniel waited, his heart beating faster. I stayed because for the first time in a very long time, I met someone who made me feel something other than duty. You threw yourself in front of those blades without thinking. You could have died. You should have died. But you did it anyway, because it was the right thing to do. She stepped closer to him. They were only inches apart now. Your species fascinates me, Daniel. You are so small and so fragile, yet you burn so brightly. You love fiercely. You protect desperately. You live every moment as if it might be your last, because for you, it truly might be. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Daniel asked. I don't know yet. A small smile crossed her face. But I would like to find out. They stood together on the balcony as the stars came out. The twin moons of Volantis Prime rose over the crystal city, casting silver light across the gardens. It was peaceful, perfect. The Unity Festival will resume in 3 days, Serafina said eventually. The delegates have agreed to stay and complete the peace accords. They want you to be there, as a guest of honor. I'm not really the guest of honor type, Daniel said. Too bad. You don't have a choice. There was warmth in her voice, something almost like affection. You will stand beside me during the ceremony. You will accept the thanks of 12 star systems. And you will pretend to enjoy every minute of it. Daniel laughed. Is that a royal command? Yes, it is. Over the next few days, Daniel grew stronger. He was able to walk on his own, then exercise lightly, then spar with the Royal Guard. Captain Vorath had become much more respectful since the attack. He had apologized personally for not taking Daniel's warning seriously. You saved our queen, Vorath said. That is a debt we can never fully repay. Just listen next time, Daniel replied. That's payment enough. Megan was preparing to return to Earth. Her assignment was complete, and she had other duties waiting. but she delayed her departure to be there for the ceremony. "I'm not leaving until I see you get that medal," she said. "Someone has to make sure you don't trip on your way to the stage." "Thanks for the confidence," Daniel said dryly. "That's what partners are for." On the night before the ceremony, Serafina invited Daniel to dinner in her private chambers. It was highly unusual, her advisors told him. The queen rarely dined alone with anyone, let alone an outsider. But Daniel was learning that Serafina did many unusual things. The meal was simple by royal standards, but still more elegant than anything Daniel had ever eaten. They talked for hours, sharing stories and asking questions. Daniel told her about his childhood, about learning to fish in mountain streams and watching the stars from his backyard. Serafina told him about the early years of her reign, about the challenges she had faced and the lessons she had learned. "What will you do when you return to Earth?" she asked eventually. Daniel had been thinking about that question a lot lately. The answer he came up with surprised even him. "I'm not sure I want to go back," he said. Seraphine's eyes widened slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Daniel struggled to find the right words. "Everything I've seen here, everything I've experienced, it's changed me. Going back to my old life, taking assignments, doing the same things I've always done. It doesn't feel right anymore. What does feel right?" Daniel looked at her, at this ancient, beautiful being who had somehow become important to him in just a few weeks. At this queen who had sat by his bed and held his hand and asked him questions no one else had ever asked. "The being here," he said honestly. "The being with you." The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. Serafina set down her glass and folded her hands in her lap. "That is a very human thing to say," she said softly. "Maybe, but it's true. I know." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the moonlit city. "I have lived for over 200 years, Daniel Cole. I have learned to be patient, to think carefully before acting, to consider consequences that won't happen for decades or centuries." She turned back to face him. "And yet, when I think about you leaving, I find that I don't want to be patient. I don't want to think carefully. I just want you to stay." Daniel rose and crossed the room to stand beside her. He took her hand, and she didn't pull away. "Then ask me," he said. Serafina looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. For the first time since he had met her, she looked uncertain. "Stay," she said. "Not as a soldier or a consultant. Stay as something more." Daniel smiled. "Was that so hard?" "Yes," she admitted. "It was." Outside the window, the moons continued their journey across the sky. Tomorrow, there would be a ceremony. There would be speeches and medals and the attention of 12 star systems. But tonight, there was just the two of them, standing together in the moonlight. The morning of the Unity Festival dawned bright and clear. The Crystal Palace hummed with activity as servants and guards prepared for the biggest event in a decade. Representatives from 12 star systems filled the halls, their conversations a mix of languages and cultures that made the air itself feel alive. Daniel stood in front of a mirror in his guest quarters, adjusting his formal military uniform. Someone had pressed it perfectly, removing every wrinkle and polishing every button. He barely recognized himself in the reflection. He looked like someone important, someone who belonged here. Megan knocked on his door and entered without waiting for an answer. She wore her own formal uniform, and her eyes were red as if she had been crying. "Big day," she said, trying to sound casual. "Yeah." Daniel turned to face her. "You okay?" Megan shrugged. "I'm leaving tomorrow. Heading back to Earth. It's going to be weird not having you around." "We've been partners for 5 years," Daniel said. "That doesn't just end because I'm staying here." "I know, but it won't be the same." She walked over and straightened his collar. even though it didn't need straightening. "You're really going to do this? Stay here? Give up everything back home?" Daniel thought about his small apartment on Earth, his few possessions, the life that had always felt temporary, like he was waiting for something without knowing what it was. "I think I already found what I was looking for," he said. Megan nodded slowly. "She's lucky to have you, even if she doesn't fully understand what that means yet." "What do you mean?" "Humans love differently than most species, Daniel. We throw ourselves into it completely. We don't hold back. That's going to be new for her. Living for 200 years, keeping everyone at a distance to avoid getting hurt. You're going to change everything she thinks she knows." Daniel hadn't thought about it that way, but Megan was probably right. She usually was. "Take care of yourself," Megan said, pulling him into a tight hug. "And take care of her too." "I will." The Grand Hall had been completely restored since the attack. New crystal tiles replaced the ones stained with blood. The chandeliers floated higher than before, their light brighter and warmer. It was as if the palace itself was trying to prove that it couldn't be broken. Daniel walked through the crowd, aware of the eyes following him. Delegates whispered to each other and pointed. He heard his name mentioned in a dozen different languages. The human who saved the queen, the one who took 3 poison blades and kept fighting. The hero. He still didn't feel like a hero, but he was learning to accept it. The ceremony began with a fanfare of music, unlike anything Daniel had ever heard. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, filling the hall with sound that was both ancient and new. The delegates fell silent as the massive doors at the end of the hall swung open. Queen Seraphina entered. She wore robes even more magnificent than the ones from the first ceremony. They flowed around her like liquid light, changing colors with every step. Her silver blue skin glowed softly, and her amber eyes swept across the crowd before settling on Daniel. She smiled. Just slightly. Just for him. Daniel's heart did something strange in his chest. The queen walked to the raised platform at the center of the hall and faced the assembled delegates. When she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the room. "Welcome, friends and allies. We gather today to complete what was interrupted by violence, to renew our commitments to peace, and to honor those who stand against darkness." She turned and gestured for Daniel to join her on the platform. His legs felt weak, but he forced them to move. The crowd parted before him, and he climbed the steps to stand at the queen's side. 8 days ago, an attempt was made on my life, Seraphina continued. Assassins sought to destroy the peace we have built together. They failed because of the courage of one being. A human who asked for nothing, expected nothing, and gave everything. She turned to face Daniel directly. "Lieutenant Daniel Cole, you placed yourself between me and death. You took wounds that would have killed most beings, and you fought until the threat was ended." Her voice softened, becoming almost intimate despite the thousands listening. "On behalf of the Volante Empire and the Unity Alliance, I thank you." A delegate from the Calori Consortium stepped forward with a small box. Inside was a metal unlike any Daniel had seen before. It was made of a metal that seemed to glow from within, shaped like a star with 12 points. "This is the Star of Unity," Seraphina explained. "It has been awarded only 7 times in the history of our alliance. You are the first human to receive it." She took the medal from the box and pinned it to Daniel's chest. Her fingers lingered there for just a moment longer than necessary. "But I have one more announcement to make." The hall went quiet. Even the delegates seemed to sense that something significant was about to happen. "Lieutenant Cole has agreed to remain on Valantis Prime, not as a soldier or consultant, but as my personal advisor and ambassador for humanity." She paused. "And as someone very dear to me." The murmurs that swept through the crowd were equal parts surprise and approval. An alliance between a human and a Volante queen. It was unprecedented. It would change everything. Daniel looked out at the sea of faces watching him. Aliens of every shape and size, united in this moment by curiosity and hope. And he understood something he hadn't fully grasped before. This was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not their technology or their resources or their military strength. It was their hearts. Their willingness to connect deeply and love fiercely, even when it was risky, even when it hurt. They showed other species that vulnerability wasn't weakness. It was power. The ceremony continued with speeches and treaties and formal agreements. Daniel stood beside Serafina through all of it, his hand occasionally brushing against hers. Each touch felt like a promise. Later that evening, after the delegates had retired and the servants had begun cleaning up, Daniel and Serafina walked through the palace gardens. The twin moons hung overhead, casting silver light across the flowers that bloomed only at night. "Are you having second thoughts?" Serafina asked. "No," Daniel answered honestly. "Are you?" "I thought I might. I have spent 2 centuries building walls around my heart. Letting someone inside again is difficult." She looked up at him. "But no, I'm not having second thoughts." They stopped beside a fountain that sang soft melodies as water danced through its crystal channels. Daniel turned to face her. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Something important." Serafina waited, her amber eyes patient. "I'm human. That means I won't be here forever. In 50 or 60 years, if I'm lucky, I'll be gone. You'll still be young by your standards. You'll have centuries ahead of you. I know. And you're okay with that?" Serafina reached up and touched his face. Her cool fingers traced the line of his jaw, the curve of his cheek. "You taught me something, Daniel Cole, when you threw yourself in front of those blades, when you nearly died for me without a moment's hesitation. You taught me that time is not what matters. What matters is how you spend it, who you spend it with." She stepped closer until they were almost touching. "I would rather have 50 years with you than 500 years alone." Daniel's throat tightened with emotion. He didn't have words for what he was feeling. So instead, he did what felt right. He leaned down and kissed her. She tasted like starlight and flowers and something else he couldn't name. When they finally pulled apart, her eyes were brighter than the moons overhead. "That is also a very human thing to do," she said softly. "Did you like it?" "Yes." A smile crossed her face, warm and real. "I believe I did." They walked back to the palace hand in hand. 2 beings from different worlds choosing to face the future together. Behind them, the garden flowers glowed in the moonlight. Above them, the stars burned bright and eternal. Somewhere out there, billions of beings went about their lives. They worked and loved and struggled and hoped. They looked up at the night sky and wondered if they were alone. They weren't. And sometimes, in the vast and complicated universe, that was enough. A human marine from Colorado and an immortal alien queen. It didn't make sense. It shouldn't have worked. But it did, because that was the human way. To love without limits. To hope without reason. To throw yourself into the unknown and trust that something good would catch you. Daniel had spent his whole life protecting others. Now he had found someone who wanted to protect him too. Not because she had to. Not because it was her duty.